and welcome to Something's Off with Andrew Heaton. I'm your host, Andrew Heaton, and your hair is so shiny. You must take really good vitamin supplements. I'm going to get in on that. So, most news programs are about to implode into a black hole of 2020 election speculation, if they have not already. I'd rather not turn this program into a play-by-play on the election, although I am up for talking about the election once a week or so. But even then, I'd rather focus on policy issues, which fortunately I can do because so far this audience seems to really like science fiction and policy wonkery. But I did have a thought over the weekend about Joe Biden and Donald Trump, which I will share with you. Instantly, I had this observation at an ostrich race, so take it as you will. Saturday, I went to the Lone Star Racetrack in Dallas to gamble and watch exotic animal racing. I assume ostrich races are like farm teams for horse jockeys. I don't really know quite how jockeys climb up the totem pole, but it makes enough sense to me that maybe you start out racing ostriches or Roombas or whatever, and then you work your way up to a Shetland pony. It turned out, though, that these exotic animals were kind of interstitial sideshows between normal horse racing, which is fine. I like horse gambling because I bet based on how funny the name is, and so far, I seem to be as good or better than the guys with betting odds and Ritalin trying to crunch the numbers to beat the house. And it's fine when I lose because at horse tracks, you're allowed to jump around and scream and throw your hat on the ground. I have more fun losing at horse racing than I do winning at poker. You can get in some really solid cardio for $5 and a bunch of ponies. Anyway, the ostrich races were in between the regular horse races, so I had some time to kill, and I hopped on Twitter. And I read this tweet by Matt Schlapp, who is the chairman of the American Conservative Union. It reads, "With 5 daughters, I'd prefer Biden to be several doors down, not next door. Trump's definition of a late-night party is the second airing of Lou Dobbs. Trump does not smoke, drink, or use recreational drugs. He tweets, and the White House is positively chic under Melania's watch." Okay. This strategic framing of Joe Biden versus Donald Trump is masterfully stupid. And if it's the game plan for Republicans moving forward, I'm going to take all of my ostrich race winnings. I'm going to bet them on Joe Biden. Let me tell you why. Schlapp's comments are predicated on 2 assumptions. First, that you shouldn't vote for Joe Biden because he's a pedophile, which isn't true, and which no one remotely serious is claiming. But the main point he's establishing is that we should go for Donald Trump because he's more morally upstanding than Joe Biden. So put this another way. I don't like Joe Biden because he's really touchy and has an inappropriate sense of personal space, which is why I support porn star banging serial philanderer Donald Trump. Now, leaving Mr. Schlapp behind because that's just a single tweet, broadly speaking, anyone who claims Donald Trump as their moral standard bearer is either the hackiest political hack who ever slinked out of a Georgetown cocktail party or is a mouth-breathing moron unfit to gamble at an ostrich race. The best argument in favor of Donald Trump, from the perspective of a traditional conservative Republican, is as follows. Listen, I know the guy's a dirtbag, but unemployment is low, we don't have any new wars, and we've scored 2 appointments on the Supreme Court. So hold your nose and vote for the outcome rather than the man. That's the best argument. But you can't seriously vote for Donald Trump on the character counts ticket because he's a feckless meat goblin. You can't be the sort of person who discounts Bill Clinton as a legitimate political leader because he got a Hummer in the Oval Office and at the same time claim to vote for Donald Trump because of his immutable personal integrity. Now, Joe Biden might have stumbled onto a winning strategy here. I don't think Biden is a brilliant political strategist. He's run for president, 68 times? Gaffe-prone Joe Biden's family crest should be a man in a necktie stepping on a rake. But Republicans are so eager to attack the Democratic frontrunner, and they're so used to running on character and morality that they're stepping on Joe Biden's rakes for him. He's not running on a grandiose Great Leap Forward plan like Elizabeth Warren or a tax-funded grab bag like Bernie Sanders. He's running a campaign as a moral and temperamental referendum on Donald Trump. And if the 2020 election is a character referendum between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, Republicans are going to lose and lose hard. Just like I lost $47 betting on Scritchy McLonglegs to place when I should have put my money on Otto von Ostrich. All right, having spewed some news at you, news analysis at you, I do need to pay the bills, and that means a word from our sponsor. Something's Off with Andrew Heaton is brought to you by Toaster Insurance from Factory Farm. Between tornadoes, Sharknadoes, Quakenadoes, and Ralphnadoes, we live in dangerous times. Wouldn't you sleep better tonight knowing that when disaster strikes, your family's toaster is covered? Whether you're a working-class family with a mobile toaster or an established family with an expensive multi-slot toaster, the prudent move is to ensure your toasting assets. Imagine if your house got robbed, or if some miscreant burned it down, or if it just plumb disappeared. When your kids look up at you shivering and crying, and the one thing they want is a warm piece of buttered toast. Do you really want to have to explain to them you're going to dip into the old college fund to buy a replacement toaster? Or do you want someone from Factory Farm to call you up and say, hey, we know how sad your family is that your house suddenly disappeared, but don't worry, your toaster is insured, and we're bringing over a big tub of Vegemite. Selecting and purchasing a toaster is a big decision, particularly if you have to finance the toaster. Isn't it worth a small monthly premium to ensure your peace of mind? Toaster insurance from Factory Farm. We've got your back, and we've also got your toaster. Okay, before I bring on my guest, we're going to do some listener feedback here at the top of the show. My producer, Jennings, collected this over the weekend. It's feedback that he thought was relevant, and we're going to go over it now. Jennings?
Hello, Heaton. Yeah, I've got some great feedback for you if you're ready.
Okay.
All right, Bob says, this is maybe one of the only shows I can stomach that has a laugh track, but it doesn't feel forced. It feels very natural.
Okay, we don't have a laugh track. Are you sure that that's a review for our show?
No, we do, but only in Japan.
We do? Really? Why?
It's a legal thing.
Okay.
Moving on.
Okay.
Bonnie says, it's a funny show. It's not a stupid show, a boring show, just a really funny show. The writing is excellent. The cast is warm, and it really holds up over time. I particularly like Stephen Root and Dave Foley.
Stephen Root and Dave Foley, the actors?
Uh-huh.
Did we have on Dave Foley and Stephen Root?
Yeah, we had them on to talk about UBI, don't you remember?
Are you sure?
Yes, it was a great episode. We got a lot of really good reviews, like this one.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Moving forward, Bill says, Phil Hartman is a comedic genius, one of the true greats of all time. Love this sitcom.
Jennings?
Uh-huh.
Did you copy and paste reviews of the sitcom News Radio instead of reviews for this program?
No.
Okay, because everything you've said so far applies to the 90s era sitcom News Radio and not to our program.
Well, everything you've said so far makes me think you're reading too much into this, Heaton. Just take the win. Can I please continue?
Yeah, okay, but just to be clear on this, these are reviews of this program and not News Radio, right?
It's not News Radio.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
Brody says, News Radio is one of the greatest sitcoms of the 90s. It is the capstone of Dave Foley's career after a laudable tenure at Kids in the Hall. It's the untimely conclusion of Phil Hartman's comedic genius and the first national spotlight for a young Joe Rogan. News Radio is definitely one of...
Okay, now that one's clearly about News Radio. You said News Radio multiple times. That was a review of News Radio.
Look, a lot of your listeners like News Radio. Does it surprise you to learn that? People who think Phil Hartman is funny also find you funny, maybe.
Okay.
Maybe instead of being paranoid that I'm pulling reviews off of Amazon at 8:15 in the morning right before hopping into my car and coming to work, you could just be grateful that your viewers clearly see a connection between you and your comedic role model.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah.
May I continue?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, sure.
Great podcast, says Bryce. My favorite episode is the one where Heaton talks with Dave Foley and Stephen Root about universal basic income. Who knew they were such policy wonks? Also love the sponsor, cheesecake flavored water. # eat at Snuffy's.
Okay, great. Thank you for the feedback.
You're welcome.
My guest today is Deanna Easley. She is the creator and host of the Black in the Day podcast, back by popular demand. Thank you for coming back. I feel bad for not having you back over the last couple of months. Yeah, I feel kind of guilty. I'm glad you're here. Thank you for coming on.
No problem. I enjoy it.
Yeah, and you wanted to talk today about welfare because we kicked this to you.
Yes.
Because the last couple of times we talked about race, and I was like, I don't want to make Deanna, because you're a very expansive person. You've got lots of different issues.
So fat.
Yes, exactly. That's what I meant by that. I was like, my friend Deanna is so overweight, and I wanted to draw that out of the top of the program. No, but I thought, the last couple of times we had you on, we were only talking about race, and I thought I don't want to limit you to that one topic. So we kicked it to you and went, what would you want to talk about? And you wanted to talk about welfare. How come?
I think that it is just something that has always kind of been in my purview my entire life. I've known a lot of people who have been on welfare. My dad has talked about it in the home. It is something that just I think it kind of touches on every single community out there. So the people who have never experienced it and don't really know much about it should know about it because you're paying for it. Yeah. And the people who live on it for their entire lives or for generations should know a little bit more about it too. So,
okay. Fair enough. And I gotta say, this is cool too because I don't really know your position on any of this. So this is like, I'm like we didn't go through notes before the podcast.
We did not.
So yeah, but I do know. I think you said you had been on welfare at one point.
Yes.
That's about all I know.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Story behind that, I was married. And I actually, funny story talking about, getting reviews from people. I got a really cool email from somebody after the last time that I was on the show with you.
Nice.
And yeah, he was talking about Scottish history. So I actually need to kick that to you.
That sounds right. That sounds like, was it Scottish history followed by like a suggestion for an advertisement and then a correction about some kind of science fiction factoid?
I think he actually did not believe that when I said my daughters were half Scottish, he said, if that's true, I really want to know more. And I was like, I've got to touch on this a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. But he just kind of doubted me a little. And I was like, I get it. But yeah, I was married, still technically married for 10 years. Have 2 daughters, Lily and Rose. And when I was 8 months pregnant with our second child, my husband walked out on our family. And it was rather shocking.
Yeah.
For all parties involved. Okay. I think I told you the story. We were at home one day and I asked him what he wanted for lunch. And he said, I want to leave. And I was like, I thought you were going to say a ham sandwich. But
see, in my mind, this is how this script plays out because you're one of my friendly sitcom character friends. I feel like, what do you want for dinner? I want to leave this marriage because we were going to get navy bean soup. I'm going to go ahead and walk out the door. Just tell me what you want for dinner.
Just tell me what it is that you need. So at that time, I was a stay-at-home mom, and we were preparing for maternity leave. I was ready to have this baby in the next 4 weeks, and he was unemployed at the time, had been for about a year. And he cleaned out our savings, so everything that I had saved.
This is really classy so far. This guy seems
super classy.
I think you should break up with this guy, Deanna. I'm on Team Deanna on this one.
I agree. It was not a good situation, and so I ended up having to give up my apartment, move in with my parents, and me and both of my daughters were in one bedroom in my parents' house. They took care of everything. They got me back up on my feet. 5 years later, you would never know that that's the case, besides the fact that their dad is not involved in their life. But I had to go back to work. I didn't have a college degree, didn't have any kind of any way to make money in any kind of substantial way that would have supported an entire household and 2 small children who weren't yet in school, paying for daycare for 2 children. One of them is a newborn. There was just no way. Paying for, Similac and
What's Similac?
Clothes. It's a baby formula.
Oh, okay.
Those things for a canister, like a small canister, is about $25, and you will go through maybe 1.5 of those a week.
Okay.
So it's massively expensive. And so I ended up on assistance, state assistance. I was able to get food stamps at the time, which pay for formula. And that's pretty much the only thing I ever used it for. It was an experience. It was not something that I ever saw myself being a participant of. I was married. I thought I had done it the right way. I thought, we went through pre-marriage counseling. I went to a Baptist college, for goodness sakes. I was thinking I have done everything the correct way, but sometimes life just punches you in the gut and you find yourself in a situation that you never thought you would find yourself in. So I was not, I think as Reagan liked to say, I was not a welfare queen. It was not something that I anticipated.
Which is my nickname for you. I should really quit calling you that. I feel bad calling you the welfare queen. In retrospect, I should just come up with a better nickname. I drew them all out of a hat.
If I've got to be the queen of something, that's the one.
How long were you on welfare for?
It was it was a little more than a year.
Okay.
A little more than a year, yeah.
So I'll tell you, I'll tell you kind of my thoughts on welfare, where I'm at right now, and then we can go for, because you probably got a better grasp of this on every level than I do. Let's take the welfare queen thing. I don't like that. I see a lot of problems with welfare, and I see a lot of harm from welfare. However, one of the things that I don't really buy into is this idea that there's a ton of people that are wanting to slack off and use welfare as a hammock rather than a ladder.
Yeah.
I think most people, there are, in any system, there's going to be people that are wanting to straggle and that kind of thing, right? But I think most people want to be productive. I think most people want to take care of their family. Most people want to have a sense of purpose. So I don't buy that, and I don't like the kind of, a lot of the time there's sort of a racial element that was brought into the welfare queen stereotype.
Yes.
Deanna, for those at home, Deanna's nodding knowingly at me when I bring that up.
That is very true.
The thing that does worry me about welfare is not that people are going to take advantage of it. I'm worried about people getting locked into it because of the welfare cliff. Which I do see being a problematic thing. And for people that are at home, if you're unfamiliar with this, there's a bunch of different agencies that administer welfare. I think there's like seven different federal branch or federal departments, because it's part of it's from food stamps from the Department of Agriculture, but there's also urban housing. There's various things, right? And so if you're making about, I think it's, if you make $24,000 a year and you're a single parent, you are eligible for welfare benefits of up to I think it's about $40,000 in total when you add it all up. And so if you're, I'm going to say, if you're wanting to work hard and you're wanting to keep your family in a good place, if all of a sudden you're given the option of getting a higher paying job, you're going from now, let's say $10 to $14 an hour, or I think the breaking point tends to be somewhere between the $12 and $18 range, but let's say $15 an hour. And you're looking at that going, right, well, I'm going to make an increase in money, but also I'm going to lose all of my eligibility for all of these benefits. It's not worth it then.
Yep.
And so that's the thing. I'm not worried about people taking advantage. I am worried about them getting locked into it, and that's my big concern with it.
That is truly an issue. I ran into that several times. I had my kids on Medicaid. Their father was still unemployed several months later, and I had left my job. That was always my intention, was to leave my job and become a full-time stay-at-home parent with my second kid. I had gone back to work when she was 4, I believe, and worked for a year. And then when I got pregnant with this one, I said, okay, I'm just going to stay at home. And so I had already left my job. I was on maternity leave, so I was still receiving benefits from work, but once that runs out after 6 weeks or something like that, you lose your insurance, you lose all of that, and you don't have anything to fall back on. I don't have any way for my child to get checkups. I don't have any way to, make sure that everything is okay with her and me. And I had C-sections with both of my kids. So I still needed, to see a doctor. And so I ended up, like you said, there are several different ways to go about getting welfare.
Because you could be on housing subsidies,
exactly.
You could have child care subsidies, there's Medicaid, there's food stamps.
Child care is a whole other thing. But yes, child care, you have the TANF, you have SNAP.
What's TANF?
TANF is temporary assistance for needy families.
Right, okay, so that's what we came up with in 96, because it used to, they're pre-96. I think you could be on welfare for a longer period of time with fewer restraints.
Yes,
and then
exactly.
Clinton and the Republicans kind of came up with, Gingrich came up with this plan to kind of reform welfare and have more work-based requirements in it. And so TANF is whatever replaced the older program? Okay.
Yeah, so we do, like you said, we have several different welfare items, I guess, that would help you in every single area of your life. So you have the urban housing situation where they will give you a place to live. It's usually in a pretty crappy area. It's usually pretty crappy housing, but it's a way to not be homeless with your family. Yeah. I never was a part of that at all.
Weirdly enough, I've lived in other projects.
Have you?
So yeah, I've got a little bit of experience with that. Yeah,
you've got some street cred.
It was now, and I'll clarify this too. I could have. This is when I first moved to New York. I wasn't making very much money. Not that we're rolling in dough, but if I'd called my parents and said I need help with rent, they would have helped me. So I need to clarify that this was not a situation where my back was to the wall.
Yeah.
That said, though, I wasn't making very much money, and my old apartment. I lived on the corner of Hipster and Violent Death in Bushwick. Like it was really like if you went that direction, there was like an organic grass-fed bicycle shop and a bar for your dog. But over here was like where the stabbings took place.
Oh boy!
And I was right on that edge. Like sometimes I wake up in the morning, there'd be blood on the pavement next to where I was.
That's
you could actually
fun.
kind of trace it because like I'd follow blood. This sounds so morbid. I would follow blood trails in the morning sometimes on my way to the subway, and you'd see like dot, and then there'd be a pool of blood, and you're like, what? And then you look up, and there was like a 24-hour kebab shop, and you're like, oh, the guy thought about getting a kebab.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, my apartment, just the lease ran out, and I had to go somewhere else. So my friend Reggie, who was a barista, I was saying like, I don't know where I'm going to live, like, and he was like, oh, like come stay for cheap, and my cousin has his aunt has an apartment in the projects, and you could go stay there for a while. So I stayed there. Yeah, it wasn't super swish. Didn't have any air conditioning. I don't know. This is going to sound weird, and I apologize for the scatological nature of this for people listening. I have no idea, but every time I took a bowel movement, all the lights turned off. I don't know. I still am mystified by that. Like I literally began to suspect that I had some kind of like psychic power in my colon.
Yeah, that was your roommate for sure.
Yeah, he's just here. We're going to do it again. We're going to do a Heaton experiment. It was okay. I didn't. I will say I didn't feel comfortable with my girlfriend coming over at the time because there were just kind of always some guys outside they just kind of looked gruff and there didn't seem to be a real neighborly vibe to it, at least with me. And I was only there for a couple of months, but that's my one project's experience.
I was not raised in the projects at all. I was raised in the suburbs, well, the country and then the suburbs. And then my first time moving out with my daughters, it was a year after my husband left. I, kind of felt confident and was making enough money where I felt like I could support my household. So I moved out of my parents' house into the most ghetto apartments in the middle of Dallas just ever. It was a huge culture shock to me. And when my parents were moving me in, they're like, are you sure though? Like, you can stay. And I was like, no, I need to stand on my own 2 feet. I had never lived alone. There's that saying, you go from your father's house to the sorority house to your husband's house. And that's kind of what I did. So I was just not, it was a whole new world for me. And my neighbors actually ended up being very, very sweet. It was not a safe neighborhood. One time some guys tried to, I put my kids in the car. They were both still in car seats, and I turned around to lock the door of my apartment. And some guys, two guys had walked up to my car, and they were trying to open the doors to steal my car with my children in it because it was running, because it was hot. It's Texas. It's the middle of the summer. So that was hands down one of the most frightening experiences.
And they're both dead now. Deanna just killed them with a crowbar that she took out of her purse.
Had taken the gun my father offered me, they would have been. But yeah, it was an experience for sure.
So can we backtrack a bit, because I think we're largely on the same page that helping people is good.
Yes,
and
empathy.
There are clearly people like you that were using welfare as a temporary measure to get on their feet and not looking to stay on it. Coming from that sympathetic perspective, I am worried about people that get into a situation where they can't advance in a job because if they get more money, they're no longer eligible. And I've thought about this, and like I could, if you're young and you don't have kids, maybe you could go, okay, well, I'm going to lose $20,000, but long term. But if I had kids. Yeah. If I had like 4 kids, I don't know that I could make that goal. Well, I'll just tighten the belt by $30,000 a year for the next 4 years until we get up past that threshold up to $20 an hour.
Yeah.
The other thing that because again there are these myriad programs. I was listening to crazy right-wing radio. This American Life about 2 years ago, and
really?
they had a great episode actually where they were looking at some of the policy implications of a lot of these kind of things, and they had an example of a young woman who. Her child has some kind of learning disability, and she was. I felt really bad for her because she was talking to them on the program, and she went, right now where my son's doing poor in school, we're eligible for federal subsidies to help with this learning disability. I would like my son to do well in school, but at the same time, I'm aware that if he does well, we don't get that money anymore. So I kind of need him to not do well in school. And I look at a situation like that, and I'm like, well, we've designed a system, probably with good intention, that's put this woman in a very difficult position of either keeping her family behind or moving forward. So I'm open to ways to try and fix this, but I do see problems with it.
There's so many different reasons why these programs have failed, and I've actually read in preparing for this, I've read so many different opinion pieces on welfare and welfare reform, and half of them say this 1996 welfare reform bill is so wildly successful. And so, half of them say it has been an abysmal failure. And I'm right there in the middle because, when you look at it, we went from having 30% of the American population on welfare at that time, at the height of it. And in the last, 30 years, 20 years, we have reduced that to 15%. But we still have 15% of our population living below the poverty line in America, which is terrible. It's still not solved. One of the biggest reasons I believe that we see a lot of poverty, and it is a racial issue, like you mentioned. We see a lot of poverty in the Black community and the Hispanic community, and we do see a lot of issues in the white community as well. It's because of the family breakdown. I truly do believe that. We no longer see marriage as an important aspect of our culture. It's just a cultural change that has happened. At the height of the Jim Crow era, we had 9 out of 10 Black babies that were born within the confines of marriage. That doesn't mean marriages were good. That doesn't mean we didn't have abusive fathers and things like that, but we did have these married couples. We did have that family situation there, a mother and father in the home. 9 out of 10 Black children. Now, 72% of Black children born in America are out of wedlock. And when you have that single parent situation, you 100% will see a higher jump in poverty. I mean, it's 5 times more likely for a child to drop out of college or drop out of high school, to be in an impoverished community, to have a hard time finding food on a daily basis when they are in a single parent household. That's just what it is. And so being in a single parent household, no matter why it happens, divorce, death, whatever, that is going to cause these issues. That's going to cause people to need to get on welfare. Some people just live on it. It's a generational thing. They wait for their children to graduate so that they can get on welfare of their own.
Yeah. So tell me about this, because you're clearly not in that camp, and I've not met I've not met your parents, but they strike me as extremely extremely upstanding. Like based on what you've said, I guarantee that your dad's lawn is immaculate.
It is,
and I bet that his gutters have no leaves in them. And
there are not.
I've got
have him pegged.
I feel like I've got a good idea of you. So you're not part of that multi-generational thing, and I don't really know people that are multi-generational. Yeah. So what is that like?
It is horrifying. It is people who send their children to school to get free lunch, even though they can make them lunch every single day. It's people who are going to take advantage of every single program that's available to them because there's no consequences. Now, there are people who are going to be on it, obviously. I think it is a necessary evil, sort of. I think there are people, like me in my situation, who are going to need it because things happen and people make bad choices. And, it's one of those things. My children shouldn't have to suffer because their dad is whatever.
Sure.
But there are people who just live on it. That's a way of life. And they honestly don't know any other way of life. They wait for their children to graduate from high school so that they can get on benefits. And they all live in the same household. And they just say, how much do you have in food stamps this month? How much do you have? They pull it together. And that's how they live in their welfare house, in their urban community. They're getting as much as they can. It's going to be WIC, it's going to be TANF, it's going to be SNAP food benefits. It's going to be as many programs as they can take advantage of. And those are the people who are kind of like the succubus of these programs. We are spending over $1 trillion a year on welfare. $1 trillion a year. A trillion with a T.
We've spent a bunch since, I think it's 1964 when we kicked off the war on poverty. I think it's like around 64. And we've spent about $15 trillion, and it's gone. The poverty rate's gone down by about 2%.
Yes.
So granted, now we've had recessions since then, we've had depression since then. So it's possible that you can't look to that as a constant rate. But I theorize that if we were to take that $15 trillion in 1964 and leave it in the economy, it probably would have made more jobs. And I think net benefit, we probably would have done better for it. And it's a very large outlay right now. Like I tend to rag on military spending quite a lot because I think it's bloated and inefficient.
Yeah. It's crazy.
But at the same time, there's even more spending on welfare programs, and I think $1 trillion, and I've seen varying estimates because it depends on which of the things you're going to put in there.
Yeah.
But there's quite a few there. But yeah, again, the thing that really worries me, I wouldn't, if it worked, I wouldn't have a real big problem with paying for it.
Yeah.
But my concern is if it is trapping people. I think that's a very problematic thing.
Yeah, and you mentioned the cliff. I know that I got to a point where my first year when I was living with my parents, because I didn't have to pay rent, I was working for a real estate company in the town where we lived, and I was making maybe $1,400 a month because I was working part-time. I had I had a lot of flexibility. I was able to bring my kids to work if I needed to, if they had a sick day. And the manager of that particular office was just very sympathetic and a really lovely person. But I also had to put my children in daycare, and daycare was $1,400 a month. So I literally was bringing home nothing, but this job was allowing me to be an active, productive parent. When their other parent was not active and productive, they needed me even more than that. And that was just a sacrifice I was willing to make. So it was, if I had made more money, then I would not have been eligible to take any of those benefits. And for my kids, that was something that was just necessary. That's something that I saw as necessary. We have such an issue, especially in the conservative segment of the population. We fight so much against abortion. We fight so much to save these babies, but it's almost as if as soon as they're born, we no longer care. As soon as they're born, we say, you're on your own. You got yourself into this mess. And that's a problem to me, because if we care about these kids, then we care about the kids. If we care about the widows and orphans, then we care about the widows and orphans forever. That's what we're called to do if you believe in that. And I feel like we as a community fail there quite a bit. We want to believe that our communities will take up the staff. They'll take up the cross and they'll take care of our communities. I was a member of a very strong church and they were helpful, but there was no way that they could have cared for my family and given them everything that they needed outside of emotional and spiritual support. They weren't going to be able to put food in my kids' mouths the way that they needed that done. And it was because of these programs that we survived. My kid just finished she's in the 3rd grade now. Very, very well adjusted. Both of them are. One's a little crazier than the other, but Lily and Rose are doing great. And Lily just finished taking the practice STAR test because she's in the 3rd grade. And she made the highest score in her 3rd grade class. Rose she just finished getting her, we just took her to get her 4-year-old shots because it was a few days before her 5th birthday and I'm really behind. And her pediatrician suggested that she go straight to the 1st grade because she hasn't even started kindergarten. She's still in pre-K, but she's a highly intelligent individual and they are just the most amazing kids. There is a very good chance that would not continue, or that would not be the case even now, if I did not give them the time and attention that they needed from me as a parent, especially as a single parent, and these benefits have allowed that to happen.
Okay, so it sounds to me like it was necessary and good in your instance. However, it can be harmful and bad in other instances. So if I'm reading that right, it could be very necessary, but it could also be horrific. So noting that, what would you attempt to do in order to smooth that out and make it, net beneficial? Oh boy,
there's a lot of problems in the communities in which this has become such a dire a need. It's something that everybody is on. And it's definitely a cultural situation. It's a mindset situation. It's people who this is all they've ever known and you just live on welfare. Like I mentioned before, one of the issues that I think would make a huge difference is kind of reminding people how important marriage is to the family. Getting that family back into what it used to be.
Well, which is one of the things that you were relying on, because you had the program, but you also said that your parents were letting you stay with them and that kind of thing. So you had a network built in. I could be wrong, but I would imagine they probably helped with watching the kids if you were working that kind of thing. So
absolutely,
you had that there. I was talking to I had a guest on a couple of weeks ago, and I mentioned that there's a scholar at Brookings who kind of came up with this formula that basically if you're below the poverty line and you graduate high school, you wait to graduate high school before you have kids, and you also get married before you have kids. And you get a job. Basically, if you get a job, that's it. Get a job, graduate high school, wait to marriage to have kids. The likelihood that you're going to get out of poverty and get into the middle class is very, very, very high.
Yes.
The probable likelihood is very, very high. And that they're if you're already pulling a really high income, you can afford to be divorced and that kind of thing, and it may not have a big effect. But if you're trying to work your way out, the family unit's very important.
Yes, it absolutely is. One of the things that I was reading about the other day, it was saying that a lot of girls who live below the poverty line, they see marriage as an ideal. They still appreciate it, but it's not something that you can attain in their lifetime. It's not something that they truthfully believe that they can ever do, and they want to have children. So they'll start to have children in high school. They'll start to have children, before they're 20, before they've had any kind of college education, sometimes before they've finished their high school education. And that's a big issue because they don't see why they should wait. We're not seeing a huge problem with teen pregnancy that's causing this welfare issue. It's not teen pregnancy, it's adult pregnancy, and it's people who are getting pregnant on purpose. It's not that they don't have contraceptives, it's because that's how families are formed. You just start whenever you start, and that's a big issue. And that's what I'm talking about, reminding them how important that marriage is to the family, reminding them how important it is to be established before you start, working your way out of they don't even realize that they're in poverty a lot of times. They don't realize that you can do something outside of this. You can do better. You can make more money than your parents. You don't have to be on free lunch. Your kids don't have to be on free lunch. You can change your family tree. And so that's a big issue. One of the things that my family and I say a lot is you don't know until you know. You don't know what you don't know until you know better. So they don't. Does that make sense? Yeah. That you don't understand that there's something outside of living on welfare your entire life.
So do you then see the solution is primarily a cultural one outside of government, or like if you were okay, so you wouldn't change the policies that much, but rather I'd say probably both. In that I think the government's pretty good at, or I should say, the government can reallocate resources. That is a use of government, is to reallocate resources. I don't think the government can love you, nor do I think the government can provide you with purpose. Okay. So there is a limit to what it can do. Resource allocation, okay. So I think a lot of the solutions are cultural. I do think I've not done the deep dive on this. I need to have like Heaton's plan for welfare reform.
It's a difficult one.
I'll say that I find we'll do it in the future. We'll do a full episode on UBI, universal basic income. I'll say the tidy part of me really likes UBI. It's the part of my brain that just wants a streamlined org chart. And I'm like, oh, that sounds like a pretty good deal. So,
I agree with you there.
Yeah.
We should have universal income, and we should have private. Universal income. We should have universal health care, and we should have private health care as well. I think people should have options.
Okay, yeah. So having some mix of them. For welfare itself, I don't know, but I would suspect that it probably is both, and that there's probably good political, or there's probably policy recommendations we can do that would improve it. But at the same time, I don't think that that'll be a catch-all. I don't think that you can treating the government like a resonant epicenter of everything in American life, I think, is a really serious miscalculation. Yeah, it's a policy tool, and it does have effects, and it often has unforeseen consequences. But assuming that we can sort of socially engineer all of American society by virtue of white papers from think tanks, I think is some kind of folly.
That's definitely not going to be the fix-all. It's not going to be the Band-Aid that we hope that it will be. I think more people need to get out and work in food pantries and help their neighbors and, get out there, because there are plenty of people who are not they're not as plugged into their community, and they're struggling. There are people who are not a member of a church, and they're struggling, and they don't have that family here. They don't have anywhere to go. And if we're not recognizing those people and giving them a hand up ourselves, then where else are they going to go but the government?
I had Tim Carney on Thursday. He wrote a book called Alienated in America, and it's about this idea that that part of that whole Robert Putnam corpus of social thought, that we're becoming more alienated. We're losing these civic organizations or the membership in them, rather. Yeah. People are going home watching TV by themselves rather than getting out and meeting people.
I love it.
And I'm very much in that school of thought. And while I feel very sorry for people if they are lonely, there's an emotional side that I think is really, really taking a toll. One of the things he pointed out in the book was that there's also in addition to that, there's an economic incentive to be a part of these various groups, because you learn skills, you make connections, you learn things, you get plugged into the community, and by virtue of that, you're more likely to get a job and keep moving on and that kind of thing, as opposed to if you're by yourself, you don't have that support network.
Absolutely. I think there's so many different things that kind of put people in that situation. You just kind of reminded me, one of the first episodes that I did on Black in the Day, it was with Isis Brantley, and we discussed occupational licensing here in Texas and how she was trying to change that.
I hope she was wanting to get rid of it.
Oh, she was.
Yeah.
She changed the laws in Texas because she was an African-style braider, and they don't use any chemicals. They don't even use combs. And she was...
I think if you braided that hair wrong, though, like a car would explode. You really need to have the government...
People could die. And so the state of Texas was trying to force her hand in getting her to take a cosmetology course, which can be like 20 grand and completely unnecessary. That is one of the other ways that we can help these lower income communities to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. We get rid of this stupid occupational licensing and allow them to make money in the ways that they know how to make money, like doing hair or, changing tires or whatever the case is, things that are not going to kill another person. It's not doctors and lawyers. It's, hair braiding.
I hate occupational licensing.
It's the worst.
I think that basically, I'll have a conversation with you about occupational licensing if the person that we're talking about, if they do it wrong, if blood's going to shoot out,
yes,
or if electricity is going to shoot out,
yes.
Everything else, though, you don't need to have somebody involved in it. Like a jet, all right, cool. But hair braiding is great, and I think that's a really, really good point you bring up because there are all of these barriers that are put in place right now that they're regressive. They're at the bottom of the economic pyramid. There are occupational licensing would probably be the first thing that I would boot kick.
Oh yeah.
Hair braiding is a great example. There's no one's going to cut someone's head off accidentally without a license to hair braid. But what they do, and the reason those exist, I mean they flat out exist in order to protect who's already in the market from outside competitors. They're not there for any public safety reason.
It is there to be burdensome. 100%.
Exactly. They want you when I was a tour guide not in Edinburgh, in DC. I ended up having to go through this process, and it was. I won't do the whole story here. The test I had to take was ridiculous. Questions didn't even make sense.
Really?
Like one of the questions was, how much land in the District of Columbia is owned by the federal government? 13, 48, 62, or 95. And I went up to the proctor and went, hi, this doesn't say if this is percentage of land or if this is acres. There's no way I can answer this question. And he just kind of shrugged. Because the point of it wasn't actually for me to know anything. The point of it was to make it difficult for me to get the job. It was for me to pay money to the government through a licensing fee, because it's a way of taxing poor people instead of rich people who put up more of a fight. And it's also a way of protecting the people that already had licenses from having to compete with an upstart like me. And then I'm going to be okay. I'm fine, right? But if you're trying to break into the market and you're looking to braid hair or arrange flowers or all these various things you can do, then you're iced out of the market and you're once again trapped in that poverty space.
Yeah, and it's drastically different state to state. Whereas you could have 4 hours of some kind of classroom training for flower arranging in one state, it could be 6 months of training, and it's going to cost you $15,000 in another state. So you can't really take things across state lines. It's the most ridiculous thing. Me buying a bad bouquet of flowers is not going to cause me to lose custody of my children. So
no. And they've got like morgue or what mortician license if you screw up as a mortician, does the body come back to life? In which case you're just a really good doctor. What are you going to do? You're going to kill the corpse? You're fine.
Yeah.
I would rather rely on Yelp reviews than have that kind of thing. We do have to cut it off there for time purposes. Deanna, it was delightful having you back on the program.
Always
Thank you for joining me.
To talk with you.
The name of your podcast one more time is Black in the Day.
Black in the Day.
Okay, cool. Come back on again. Let's hang out some more.
Absolutely, 100%.
Little listener feedback before we take off. On iTunes, Nina.Penta says, Andrew is thoughtful, knowledgeable, clever, and keeps me laughing. He might be the perfect guy, but he definitely has the perfect podcast. Oh, perfect. I was worried about where that butt was going to go. Political but not divisive. I'm hooked and hoping for a less tragic ending for Dottie the dog. Thank you very much. The quest goes on. I'm trying to get a dog, Deanna. There's been a couple of loops, but I'm working on it. I'll keep you guys posted. You can watch this whole show on YouTube. If you look for Something's Off with Andrew Heaton, you can see my handsome bearded face and my delightful guests and assortment of suits and the dead bison head we screwed to the wall. Watching Something's Off with Andrew Heaton on your computer will only make you seem more sophisticated and amusing at that office cocktail party. The one where you have 1 or 3 too many tequila sunrises and you get up just enough courage to talk to Susan for marketing, but right as you start to talk to her, you realize that you don't have anything to say. Talk about this show. That's right. You're welcome. So go to YouTube and start watching full episodes. I look like I already tried that routine with Susan from marketing, and maybe you'll have better luck. Set me up and knock me down, Jennings. Remember, you can always tweet me at Mighty Heaton or Facebook me at facebook.com/Mighty Heaton, or even email me by subscribing to my newsletter at mightyheaton.com and replying when I send it out on Fridays sometimes, or alternately when you get that confirmation letter. Finally, please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. That helps you, me, and other political orphans all hang out together at this political orphanage. Thank you, and good day.